All right, we're live. All right, welcome to another episode of Rock and Block. Today's episode, we're gonna flip around just a little bit. Instead of actually just talking about technology, entrepreneurism from a let's take on the world and we're all mighty, we're actually going to talk about legacy and how important it's actually building a legacy. When I start talking about building a legacy, one of the things that I like to tell everyone is building your legacy is just like building the foundation of buildings or bridges. If you've actually read any of the articles that I've written, um, for some reason, I'm fascinated with the whole building bridges. Mainly when I went to New York for the first time in my life in 2017, and I saw the Brooklyn Bridge, and I realized this thing has been built for so long and it hasn't been shaken. And that got me thinking into, you need to have a very solid foundation in order for things to actually stay there and carry on. And when we think about legacy, we think about what are we offering the world and what are we offering for other people that we can impact and such, and how can one individual start building their legacy, start little by little building up their dreams, their goals, so they can start building their businesses and their successes, and from there on impact others so others can carry on and be looked up to as mentors or as influencers or just as people that actually are legit, as I like to say. Or if you are someone who was raised in the 90s like I was, you can say legit, for real. So joining me today is Matt Lebris. How you doing, Matt?
I am terrific. I am terrific. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here with you today.
Awesome. So it's funny because we actually kind of like met on Facebook, and it was weird because I usually tend to be very picky on who I interchange or exchange messages with. But as soon as you were like, hey, I'm able to actually guess for a couple of people, and I started looking for your information and such, I was the thing that popped immediately in my head was like, whoa, this guy is legit. Because the very first thing that you actually say in your webpage is, my name is Matt and I want to keep it real with you here. I'm like, okay, that's sounds kind of like me. But at the very end of your about section, when you start telling your story, I'm not going to get into that because I want to leave that to you. You say hashtag, let's leave a legacy. And that's actually the thing that impacted me the most. And before we dive into the whole thing, I think I've been talking way too much for the beginning of this episode. I want to read I want to read this because I think that it will relate to everything that you're going to be talking about. True leaders don't invest in buildings. Jesus never built a building. They invest in people. Why? Because success without a successor is failure. So your legacy should not be building buildings, programs, projects. Your legacy must be in people. Miles Monroe. I think that it actually pertains to kind of like what your journey is all about. So talk to us about your journey. I think that it starts at 12 years old when you actually began with your entrepreneurial mind.
Yeah, man. And listen, this is, I'm so glad you brought that up because this is a very true story. You know, whenever I tell it, people think it's a joke, but at the end of the day, it's as real as it comes. And, going back to 12 or 13 years old, whatever it was, I remember my buddy who lives on the same street as me, very friendly family community. And we were always hanging out. And I remember one day we came across the idea that we wanted to start our own restaurant. Now, at 12 and 13 years old, that might be a challenge for some, but for us, it wasn't. And what we did was we rated our parents we rated our parents cabinets and refrigerators, and next thing you know, we started a restaurant. And I'm not going to lie, it only lasted a day or two before I was punished for the next week. And it definitely gave me a taste of what I wanted in life. And I always say that being from New York, it's almost inevitable to not catch that hustler spirit, and it's true. And it goes all the way back to me being 12 and 13 years old where it really all started.
I can relate because when I was I've said this so many times, but I'm gonna get into the second part. I learned English because when I was 8 years old, like this is 1993. Yes, 1993. The first anime thing that I saw in my life was Dragon Ball Z Legendary Super Saiyajin movie, which coincidentally is the first time we ever saw Broly, which is coincidentally the new movie of Dragon Ball Super right now in theaters in America. And it was a bootleg VHS. Yes, it was a VHS tape. And I'm old. Um, and I didn't understand English. It was Japanese with English subtitles, and I wanted to figure what the hell they were saying. So that's when I really started paying attention in class. But when by the time that I was 12 years old, I was the kid in the street in school that actually had access to the bootlegs, and I started copying copies of pirated bootlegs and trying to hustle and started selling these copies to my friends and trying to sell images, floppy disk with images loaded with images of Dragon Ball so they could print it and they could have it. And almost no one had internet back in 1997, 1998. It wasn't as accessible as it is today. So if you had an internet connection, you were kind of like the savior, without getting religious, the savior for everyone, or you were the hero of everyone. So I started with that mind. And it was funny because my dad actually started asking me for money, like, for me to lend him money. Like, can you lend me $150? Yeah, sure. Just open the sock drawer and take whatever you want. It was funny. He was 13 years old, and I was already like making that. And I involved my dad, and even his friends and his job had kids, and they started asking their parents for dad, and dad would hook me up with them. And I started making labels. We already had a computer and covers and such. So I developed kind of like a legit business. So I relate to you because of that. Then dad realized that, hey, this is piracy, and I'm involved with law enforcement in some way or another. So I was grounded too because of that. And then it was like, yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, man. Listen, you caught the bug early, right?
Right. But it at that point in time, I realized that, hey, if I want to do anything in my with my life, it's I want to be the one calling the shots. But it was way too amp at that. My vision was way too amp at that time, and it took me many years to actually like laser focus on certain things.
For sure.
But later on in your blog, you actually mentioned that you promoted a 18th birthday, but you didn't show up, and it was actually your 17th birthday. You didn't show up, and you actually made money. Like, you made it a second attempt years later to actually try to figure out on another way, and that actually resulted positively in some other shape or form. Like, what was that about?
Yeah, man, that resulted in many positive relationships and opportunities, experiences, and whatnot. And I can't take credit for everything I did within the nightlife industry. I owe a lot of credit to my team. I owe a lot of credit to the individuals that quote unquote put me onto the opportunity. I think that was really crucial. I didn't create this opportunity through a pen and pad. I created it through an actual relationship, and that goes all the way back to what you were saying earlier, right? In regards to Jesus building a building or whatever that quote said, it was more so he was building relationships with individuals. And that's
Right.
exactly what I've done my entire life. So, yeah, man, I got started in the nightlife industry at 17 years old. And I was actually involved at 16, but it really started at 17 for me. And, I was given the opportunity graciously thanks to the individuals that I surrounded myself with. They were older individuals. They were probably, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years older than me. And next thing you know, like you mentioned, I was promoting my 18th birthday, which was really my 17th birthday. I was not old enough to get into the club, so I did not show up. It was an 18 and over party, and I didn't have a fake ID, so I couldn't get in. But on the flip side, I remember I got a call the day after the party, and the individual on the other end of the line said, "Hey, Matt, let me know when you're free to meet up. I have an envelope for you." And I said, "An envelope of what?" Like I didn't know that the terminology he was using. This is the first time I'm ever getting paid.